Elizabeth, welcome to the Calm Mom podcast. It's so good to have you with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This is great. I was telling her right before we hit record that we do these, not these episodes, but episodes about relationships and marriage and communication and marriage, I think, after parenting and becoming parents, because there's such a shift there. And you guys really love these episodes. So I'm believing that today is just going to give you more tools in your marriage and relationship toolbox. So I'm really excited for that. But before we start, Elizabeth, can you just let everyone know just a little bit about you and the work that you're doing and have been doing?
Sure. I am a mom. So I have two kids and I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I'm a therapist. I've been working with couples for over 15 years now. And that is primarily what I do. And niching down even further, I mostly work with really busy parents. And so a lot of dual income households with um, kids and lots of things going on and a lot of stress. And again, I've been doing that for 15 years. And I run a therapy practice where I train a lot of therapists across the United States, really, to work with couples. I've written a couple books for couples to read. And I've also written things for therapists to help them get trained in the practice of couples therapy. So it's really where my heart is.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's start with I kind of want to start with like just conflict in marriage or kind of some myths around that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think so my husband and I have been doing or like facilitating leading premarital counseling for couples that are about to get married for years now. We've been doing that for like, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And I just love it because every time these couples come in and you see like common, I'm sure you see the same thing, but it's like common themes, common threads, and you kind of know they're coming. And these couples come through and they are like, not terrified, but they're like, oh my gosh, what happens if one day like we just start fighting with each other, or like everything's so great now, but like what if, all this conflict comes up? And when that comes through, there's a part of me that's always like, okay, we need to remove the like what if from this and get to a place where we're actually expecting and anticipating conflict, because that's actually super normal in a healthy marriage. And I think people often assume the opposite. They're like, man, if we fight or don't agree on everything or whatever, there's like major problems in our marriage. So I think I'd like for you to start there and just kind of address that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then maybe we could talk about like, okay, now what do we do now that we've like normalized it?
I love that you're bringing that up. And also it's interesting that you say, they almost all come in and say this, right? I even with my own work doing premarital, I think the most common thing that people say is, like, what type of couple are we? Do you think they like want to be like typed?
How are we going to make it?
Yeah. If you do prepare enrich premarital counseling, there's different types. There's like the harmonious couple and da da da. I actually forget all the types because I don't purely do prepare enrich, but they'll ask like, well, what if we're a harmonious couple now, and then later on down the road we get into an argument, or like, what could we do now to not be that couple?
Yeah.
And I try to normalize it by saying you're going to be, because the reality is that you're going to face stressors together.
Yep.
And what we can do best to prepare for those stressors is to help you figure out how do you identify what happens to you as a person when those things happen, and what you want to agree to do and how you want to agree to respond to each other.
Yeah.
Communication wise in those moments. But there's nothing that we can, because they'll often, I'm sure you experience this, they'll often ask like, well, should we talk about what we want to do with raising kids? Or should we talk about how we're going to deal with our difference in religion? Or should we talk about, I'm like, and they want me to tell them, yeah, that's the problem. That's the thing that's going to make you get divorced. You like taking vacations. You don't like taking vacations. And so they want me to say, that's going to be really bad, or don't worry, it's not bad. And what I always say to them is, any of these things could be really bad and any of these things could be fine.
Yep.
It depends on how you're going to deal with it when you finally have to deal with something.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all premarital couples haven't dealt with something together, but the majority haven't. The majority have had a few stressors, and then they get married, and usually the very first one is having kids. There's sometimes the first one is the wedding itself, because it's the first time they notice wow, your mom really doesn't respect me. Or wow, you're cheap. Why don't you want to just spend money?
Yes.
But yeah, like
Yeah.
normalizing it and recognizing you're very different people. You have
Yeah.
different life philosophies. We're not going to unravel all of those before you get married, but you
Mm-mm.
have to know how you're going to deal with that when it rears its head, which it will.
Yeah, that's so good. I think I don't know if it was the Gottman Institute or something else, but I had read this study once and it was like the greatest indicator of success, like long-term success in a marriage, wasn't how often you fight or what you fight about, but it was how you fight. And that's like
Yeah,
exactly what you're saying, right? That's so
exactly. I
true.
mean, there's a lot of studies that show different, that have been able to show that again and again. So there's been studies that have been done that show, in a really kind of hyper focused way, that it's not actually the issues. It's actually kind of not even totally the words. It's
Mm,
whether or not people get flooded.
yeah.
And so that in itself is a huge predictor. So
Yeah.
you and another person could have the same disagreement, but if you and your partner are able to stay calm and they are not, they're obviously going to have more problems than you. And then, yeah, there's been other studies that are kind of less niche down on specific flooding, but just are you able to talk in a way with each other that shows we're on the same team?
Yeah. So for our audience, we talk a lot about being dysregulated or feeling dysregulated.
Yeah.
And you talk about being flooded. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, so emotional flooding is when your body is having a stress response that, is thinking that something's a threat
Yeah.
around you. And what starts to happen with, I'm sure you talk about this with dysregulation, is that your body starts to get flooded with hormones that are meant to protect you.
Yeah.
So, in some situations, very helpful.
Hmm.
They're meant to get you over the tension point, right? And so,
Hmm.
whether that's running from a lion or figuring out a new task or hiding from somebody who's trying to mug you, like all of those things are good things and they're good responses to stress. Unfortunately, in relationships, we have the same threat response, even when we're not actually being physically threatened. We have
Yes.
the response when we're being existentially threatened.
Hmm.
So, and what I mean to for your listeners with existential threats, it does not mean that you have this feeling because you think you're going to die because your partner
Right.
doesn't agree with you. If you do think that, then obviously you should be flooded and you should actually get away
Oh, yeah.
and get some help with that. But what you're actually feeling threatened with is existential threat of the thing I believe my life philosophy
Mm,
is coming into conflict with your life philosophy. So that feels very threatening. And then the
mhm.
second thing is feeling a serious amount of threat about not getting what you think you need, whether
Yeah.
it is actually what you need. So sometimes it is actually what you need. I've been up all night with the baby. I need some sleep right now, or I'm going to lose
Mhm.
my mind.
Mhm.
And then sometimes you think you need it, but you don't, but you feel threatened because the other person doesn't agree. They're not giving it to
Right.
you. And so you start to have the same responses you would have in a threatening situation, when you get flooded. And if you're in a threatening situation, you're not going to be particularly relational, which is good. But with your partner, it's not good. And
Yes.
that is why it creates a cascade towards the relationship ending over time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that because that's really
Yeah.
good. I share this quite a bit on the podcast, but I remember, so my husband and I were married for 8 years before we had kids. And
Okay.
people, like, I'd always just hear people being like, oh, marriage is so hard and it takes so much work. And like that, I never resonated with that before I had kids because
Yeah.
I was like, oh, no, it's not. Like, we're best friends.
Oh,
He works in restaurants. He gets home. We go out to eat at midnight. It's so fun. We sleep in till 9. I go to law school. Like, and then we had kids, and I'm like, holy flipping moly, like this is what they were talking about. This is
yes.
so hard for the first time. And I think there's a lot wrapped up in that beyond the obvious, stress of now taking care of tiny human. But let's kind of talk about the impact of stress on our marriages in particular. Like we talked about this flooding and how that doesn't allow us to show up or communicate in our highest best ways. But I would love to hear a little bit about like what are some other ways that stress impacts our marriages, even that people might either be resigned to, like, oh, that's just how marriage is. And you're like, well, no, there's actually a better way.
Yeah.
Or that they're kind of not even aware of that this is stress impacting your marriage.
Yeah. So to start at the beginning, we have two different types of stress that can impact a marriage
Okay.
or a relationship. And the first type is external stress. So these are the stressors that are happening to you because of things outside of the relationship, uh, work, deadlines, your parent is sick and you're worried about them, you got stuck in traffic. So it could also
Yeah.
be acute. It just happened once, but it made you feel dysregulated. Um, the second type of stress are what I call internal stressors. And so these are
Okay.
stressors that you're experiencing with the person. So
Mm,
you get home and you wanted to cuddle and they weren't being affectionate. So you start to have kind of an internal stress response. Like,
mhm.
do they not like me anymore? What does that mean for my future? This is the existential threat, right? Like, am I not loved? Or maybe you and your partner vehemently disagree on how you're supposed to do bedtime. And,
Yeah.
one of you is like the dragger outer of bedtime, and the other is put them in bed and close the door. And if they fuss, oh well. And you're having this, and it's causing you a lot of stress because every single night you can't get on the same page. And so,
Yep.
any of these things can cause a stress response in our body. And
Mhm.
that stress response, like I mentioned before, primes us for survival. And so, slowly, what starts to happen, or actually quickly, what starts to happen in our body is that our muscles, our heart, our stomach get ready to protect ourselves. So, we become more tense and our heart is
Yeah.
racing. And when all that's happening, our face doesn't look as nice and friendly anymore, whether we want it to or not, because all the muscles are starting to move and become tensed up muscles. And so we might look like we're scowling, even when we don't mean to look like we're scowling, or we might look completely out of it, right? Because we're
Mhm.
withdrawn.
Yes.
And then our minds change.
Mhm.
The mind changes on to be hyper focused on the threat.
Yes.
So, a threat to your need or a threat to your existential desires of what you
Mhm.
hope for and believe. And because of that, you can't do anything that's not hyper focused on winning against that threat.
Yeah.
And so, where usually you'd be able to maybe joke about it or be curious or talk or let it roll off your shoulders because you assume the
Mhm.
best, problem solve, you actually physically can't do those things anymore because your brain is saying, no, 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 no. Don't don't laugh a funny laugh about how the kids are screaming upstairs because your partner's doing it different than you. It's not funny. It's
Yeah.
gonna ruin our lives. They're gonna end up being horrible kids,
No
and the
one's
whole
gonna sleep. Tomorrow's already ruined.
tomorrow's ruined. But so is their life. They're gonna be in prison.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Their teacher is gonna call us and say we're a horrible parent. So, but if you're
Big.
thinking, you start to think this way. And so what
Yeah.
happens is you stomp up the steps and you say, I'm going to take over. You never know how to do this.
Mm.
Get in bed. This is ridiculous that you've let it go on this long, or you're being mean. Don't, and then later on, you're like, why did I speak to my partner that way?
Yeah.
Because if I would have just after the fact said, hey, what the heck happened up there? Could we try and make it better next time? We would have had a way to deal with that. But
Yeah.
now we're mad at each other. But all of this was because we were hyper focused on I've got to fight against all of these fears that I'm having that
Yep.
I'm not even consciously having. They come to me in a second. I feel threatened and I've got to act. And
Yeah.
so whether you're filled with stress to the brim because work sucks, or you're filled with stress to the brim because you and your partner do not agree on how to do something and it's making the house feel stressful,
Mhm.
or both, then you're going to be in a different position for dealing with your disagreements than you would if you were able to regulate that stress differently.
For sure. Okay, so this is awesome because I would venture to bet that every single person listening can like insert themselves into a scenario like that where like I wish I could have just been like lighthearted about it, but it just like this rage came over me or whatever it is, and I reacted, right?
Mhm.
um how do you teach people to start to interrupt that pattern or notice it and like be able to do something about it before they get to that point where they're doing something that they don't actually want to be doing?
Number one is always awareness.
Yeah,
That feels like such a basic answer, but it just
it is.
is. As soon as you're able to say, Okay, I snapped at my entire family last night
Hmm.
because I opened my email right before dinner time and I got someone's resignation and I'm really PO'd about it. That's why I snapped at everybody.
Yeah.
I was stressed. It actually wasn't my conscious mind. Yes, would I have been frustrated and angry? Maybe, but the reaction was not really related to what was happening for real. It was related to my threat. So once you're aware, number one, you're going to know the types of things that set you up for it.
Yeah.
And then you're responsible for changing those things.
Yes.
So one thing I noticed with myself is when that example I gave is a real example for me, right? Like if I check my email before we're about to do something as a family, even if
Hmm.
it's quick in the car, there's always a risk that I'm going to get one that makes me stressed out.
Yeah.
A bill or somebody asking me to do something or learning I messed something up, whatever. And as soon as that happens, I get nasty and I don't
Yeah.
even mean it, right? Like my husband will be like, "Hey, did you hear what I said? What do you want? Which restaurant should I go to? I'm driving. I need to pick." And I'll be like, "Are you kidding me? I'm checking my email right now. Don't you see I'm doing something?" And he's like, "Why are you checking?" So I've learned,
Yeah.
because I can recognize that I change when I'm stressed, why would I actively choose to bring it into the moments where it shouldn't be there?
Hmm.
So that's the first piece. You can start to change things, but there's a lot of things you can't change.
Right.
Kids are going to have a meltdown in the middle of the grocery store and it's going to stress you out. You
Hmm.
are going to get a phone call, even if you try to have good boundaries about something upsetting.
Hmm.
You are going to misread or properly read your partner's facial expressions in a way that causes you stress. That's going to happen. So, the second piece of this is, now that you're aware that stress causes you to react differently,
Hmm.
you need to start recognizing what's going on in my body
Yeah.
when I feel stressed. And if I can get good at identifying that, I can have some sort of quick thing I can do to put space between that feeling and my reaction.
Yes.
So all of a sudden it's, uh-oh, I feel like my chest is on fire and I want to scream. You
Hmm.
used to just scream. Now maybe what you say is, my chest is on fire and I want to scream. So actually what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say, I want to scream at you. So I'm walking out of the room.
Yes.
And you can say that, like, at
Yeah.
least, you don't have to become a Zen, like, whew, okay, I felt the heat in my chest and now I'm calm. It can be,
No.
I feel it. I'm really mad at you guys, and I'm getting out of the car for a couple minutes. And
Yes.
I'm taking a beat.
Love
Um,
it.
the the second thing you want to learn how to do is finish your stress cycle. So your stress cycle is meant to be there just to signal that you have to do something. It's not meant to stick around.
Hmm.
It sticks around in modern life because we move less.
Hmm.
So in the past, if somebody had a stressor, even if they couldn't get rid of it, like let's say their house was going to be taken back by the bank, the farmer's farm, not that he wouldn't be stressed, but at least he would be out on the farm
Yeah.
pulling things out of the ground,
Yes.
raking, doing all sorts of things. So for a little bit, his body would release some of that.
Yeah.
And then, go back to thinking about it later and have to deal with it. But we don't release it very well.
Yeah.
So we're getting this signal from our body that we're in danger. And then our body isn't experiencing us running away from it or
That's right.
fighting it.
Yeah.
And what we have to learn to do is, how do I tell my body there's actually nothing to run away from or fight?
Hmm.
And the way you do that is you do activities that you wouldn't do if you truly had to run away or fight. And so once you put that beat in place of, oh, I feel it, I need to step away, then
Yeah.
you can think about those areas I said are impacted by stress: your muscles, your breathing, and your thinking. And so any of those three areas, if you do something for them that shows they're not in danger, it will help you. So,
Hmm.
for example, some people might be like, I like to target my muscles. So your muscles want to punch something.
Hmm.
So for that type of person, you can finish the stress cycle, go for a run, or go punch a pillow,
Yes.
or lift weights,
Yes.
or do jumping jacks, or balance yourself on a plank. Any
Yeah.
of those things will signal to your body, good, they did what they were supposed to do. They used their
Paying
muscles.
attention.
Paid attention. If you're not a muscly person like me, I don't like that stuff. You can focus on breathing.
Yeah.
So I can remind myself I'm okay by taking slow breaths. because if I wasn't okay, I'd be taking rapid breaths to get
Yeah.
myself going.
Yeah.
Or thinking, which is usually the one that helps me the most. So thinking could look like you're journaling, you're reading, you're drawing, something where you're bringing your brain back online to, would I be journaling if I was in danger?
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's a long-winded response to some of the things that you can do.
No, I think that's spot on, and it's so affirming for a lot of the things that we teach. So I love that everyone had a chance to hear that, and I think those are awesome, like in the moment things where we notice we're being triggered, and then you've given us some really helpful tools for how we can help complete that stress cycle. And we all have a limited capacity for stress,
Yeah.
right? We all have a window of tolerance, certain bandwidth,
Yeah.
and that is flexible. There are things that we can do to increase our capacity, and there are things
Yep.
that we do or don't do that will shrink our capacity to handle life. I know you talk about an overinflated balloon.
Yes.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that as it relates to like stress, communicating with our partners, our bandwidth, all of these different things.
So I like to think of people when they're under stress, and this is really kind of like window of tolerance, right? It's like your balloon is completely full of helium, and if you pump any more in there, you are going to pop. So like any more requests, anything else that
One
somebody,
look.
one look, anything else going in, it's going to make it pop. And so what ends up happening between couples is that somebody will have that overflated balloon and their partner will push more air in. And
Love
people do that more often than they pull the air out. It is just how, I
this.
don't know why human beings are that way to each
Yeah.
other, but we do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know actually. It's because we feel other people's stress. So we respond in a stressed out way because we start to feel stressed.
Like a stress one-upper. We're just like
We just, yes, we want up this. We're like, all right, well, if you're stressed, I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm just going to blow more stress in there. And the more we can become aware, what we can do is
Yeah.
we can help people to deflate their balloon. And
Mhm.
so we recognize, woo, their balloon is inflated.
Yeah.
My husband's really good at this. Most of the time he notices. I can tell
Mhm.
you had a bad day at work. Like,
Yeah.
why don't you go and sit for a few minutes? Or I can tell that you're frustrated. Go and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when we're not aware, and it took time for my husband and I to become like that, we will do things like tell the person that they're wrong, play devil's advocate,
Yeah.
talk about our own stress. And so what that might sound like is somebody is like, I can't do one more thing. I'm going to lose my mind. And
Yeah.
then the partner says, well, I've been doing a lot all day too. So,
Mm.
what are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Or maybe something like, I don't know if I can go back to work tomorrow. I'm so upset. I hate my boss so much. And we push advice in. Well, have you thought about if you just maybe
Mm.
you stopped caring so much, or maybe they have a point. So anything you do that's like pushing more in, like listen to what I have to say, or take in my thoughts, or take in my stress, the person is more likely to explode. Anything you can do to pull out. How
Mhm.
are you feeling? What do you need to relieve some of this air? Do you need a second? That is going to decrease the likelihood that somebody explodes.
That's so good. Okay, so let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Um, in my experience and understanding, without like overgeneralizing, there tend to be differences in how men and women communicate, right?
Mhm.
You're talking about advice giving as something as blowing helium into this balloon.
Yeah.
And for women listening who have had that experience, it's like I try to like let air out to my husband, but all he seems to do is like tell me to do something I've already thought of or tried, or he's just trying to solve my problems and he doesn't listen. What is a good, healthy way for
Mhm.
them to express how that feels and then ask for what it is that they're actually needing in that moment instead of advice?
Yeah. So outside of the moment, a way to deal with that is to bring it up by just saying what you've noticed.
Okay.
I notice that when I'm upset, and to try to look at it in the best possible light.
Okay.
So we don't want to become critical and say, I notice when I'm upset, you're always trying to dismiss me and you seem to
Mhm.
have no emotional IQ and da 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 da. But instead, like I notice when I'm upset, you tend to give me advice. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that that's probably you trying to help me.
Mhm.
Because most things people do that's unhelpful when somebody is stressed is actually because they wish they could relieve the pain,
Mm.
right? Like even when you're grieving
Trying
and
to help. Yeah.
somebody's like, oh, maybe there was a reason for this breakup. And like, yeah, maybe there was a reason for the breakup. Nobody wants to hear it in the moment, but they're trying to like, oh, don't feel this pain. Come on, let's move forward.
Yeah.
So you can say, I really appreciate in those moments you're trying to help me. And what I notice about myself, and you want to talk about yourself.
Okay.
Because but nobody wants to hear that. But like what I've noticed about
Mm.
myself is what tends to help me better is if you just hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
And if next time I'm upset, if you could just say, like, what's this like for you? Or ask me questions about it, that's going to be more helpful. I'm not saying your partner's going to be able to do that the next time because it's
Yeah.
likely habitual. But then what
Yeah.
you can say the next time is, babe, do you remember what we talked about? It would be so much more helpful right now if you would just let me vent.
Yeah.
The second part that I think or the second conversation I think can be helpful is asking, if we're talking about like a man and a woman,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask your husband or your boyfriend, because we're generalizing right now, why what is it that you like when you're upset? I
I love that.
actually don't find many men even agree that advice giving is helpful to them.
Wow.
And I think that they might say it initially. Well, I would just want somebody to tell me what to do. It's not the case. I work with tons. When a man is upset and sharing, which is more rare, so you don't see it as often,
Yeah.
and their wife starts to say, well, I don't know why this is such a big deal to you. Why don't you just talk to your brother and change the contract for the family business? They become deflated too.
Yes.
And so sometimes I think if you can talk to people, not as a gotcha, like true curiosity of like,
Yeah.
I am curious, when you're upset because I want to do what's good for you. Like, does it feel helpful for me to give you advice, or like, what would that be like for you?
Yeah.
And I think many partners would say, honestly, probably not. I would probably feel frustrated by that. So in that, you learn more about them, but maybe they can also develop some understanding and empathy for you. The next thing to think about with this, because this is a huge one, is to recognize there are differences and to try as hard as you can, which I know is very, very difficult, to recognize that it is possible that your partner does not have emotional vocabulary because they've never practiced it.
True.
So you're asking them to communicate in a feminine way. And then when they can't do it because they have not been socialized to practice it, you're telling them they failed.
It's so
And
good.
that
Yeah.
would be like telling somebody in first grade to do calculus and then to say, what's wrong with you? You must not care about math homework because you can't do your calculus. And so I want you to try really hard not to jump to, you must not care about me, or you must not, or any of those criticisms.
It's really
And
good.
think more about, is it possible that we have just very different emotional language here and ways of talking? And do I need to provide more guidance to my partner? Not forever. I'm not telling you that you have to be their teacher or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but more of an assumption of the best. I'm assuming that maybe you don't know how to talk to somebody this way.
Mm.
Because the reality is, like, your husband probably hasn't actually had many conversations with people about their feelings.
That
Not as
is such a
many
good
as you.
point. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And there's so much compassion in that and curiosity in that, which is like,
Mhm.
go with curiosity and compassion. You'll be in such
As
great
much
shape.
as you can. But it's hard to do when you have your little
It's
stress
so hard.
levels on. You're like, I can't be curious with this person. They're going to take advantage
Yes.
of me and they're never going to change. And so it's hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Something for us that was helpful too, like my husband and I have gone through this. I know a lot of people have, was like earlier on, I would tell him like, can you just ask me like, hey, do you want me to help you solve this? Or do you just want me to listen right now?
Yeah. That's
And then I'm
all they
like,
have to do is if
super easy.
could just ask me. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm plugging something in. If you could just ask me what I want, that would be so helpful. And in some ways, that makes it more tangible to the guy who wants to help anyway, because
Yeah.
giving you something, what do you want me to
That's
do?
true.
Men sometimes like to be told what to do. They can feel valuable in that.
Yeah.
So,
It's like a
yeah,
roundabout way to get both needs met.
yes.
Okay. I want to, so in that you brought up such great questions. Like I kept hearing you say like, you could ask this or you could ask this. When we are noticing that our partners are stressed, what are some really good questions, I guess, like starting points for opening up dialogue and conversation, or just like being a good friend and partner to our people when we're noticing they're stressed?
The best, most important thing you could do actually has nothing to do with talking first. It's
Hmm.
about recognizing how you're responding physically to their stress.
Come on. Okay.
Because what we talked about earlier is if you're hearing somebody talk about something upsetting and you're starting to get flooded by it for whatever reason, you feel sad for them, it's annoying to you. I mean, the reality is
Yeah.
sometimes we talk to people about their problem and we wouldn't admit this, but their problem annoys us.
Yes. Yes. It happens in my marriage a lot. I'll be honest.
Yeah, with your best friends, with where you're just like internally, oh, here we go again. You start to
Yeah.
feel flooded because you're thinking, is this the rest of my life having to deal with this, having to deal with this complaining or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if you can just recognize what is happening in me first, and this can be a 2-second scan for yourself.
Yeah. It's good.
What is happening for me? I'm noticing that I'm getting tense. I'm noticing that I feel hot. I'm noticing that my stomach is annoyed, like, and I can feel it, or my face is clenching. How do I bring myself down to a calmer space within myself? Because people feel that and they either just regulate with each other or they help to regulate. And so there's some hacks for how you get yourself to sound calm that actually make you calm, right? Or
Okay.
seem calm. And so even if you're like, here we go again, my husband's complaining about the same thing again, or my partner is my best friend, take a deep breath and talk with a more quiet voice.
Mm-hmm. I
Because,
do that with my kids a lot. Like
yeah,
they'll know, like I'm like, go put your shoes on.
right. Yeah. Like if I get really irritated with my son, I'm like, I know today was really hard. And that isn't only helpful for him.
Hmm.
It's helpful because it actually tells my body we're not in fight or
Okay.
flight. We're
Yeah.
cool. But it tells his body that too.
Hmm. I
So
love
even
that.
if he knows it's a fake out, even if he's like, my mom is trying to cool herself down, he physiologically recognizes this is a person who's cool, calm, and collected. And now
Mm-hmm.
I can talk, or now I can whatever.
It's
So
great.
that's first. Once you have been able to work through, and you can continue to work through that while you're talking, open-ended questions. You don't need to
Mm.
work that hard. Questions like, or even statements, tell me more about that. What's the hardest part of this for you?
Mm.
What are you worried will happen? What ideas do you have?
It's great.
Any of those, they help people to open up about their stress. You try to stay away from gotchas like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I thought you said before that you really liked your boss,
Mm.
or advice giving, you know.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you what you should do about that. But just pulling out the air from the balloon. What's upsetting? What's the worst part? How are you feeling about it? What do you think you need? What have you been thinking you want to do? All of those things help pull all of that out. At the very end, if you have ideas, you can, of course, it's a relationship. We don't need to be like rigid and not really communicating. You can, of course, say, like, as I was listening to you, I have some ideas. Do you want to hear
Mm-hmm.
them? But you let that air come out first, because then that means they can take more air in. So you're not going to blow more in until you take some out.
Okay, that's so helpful. As we talk about stress in our marriages, I know that's your book that just came out, right?
Yeah,
Till Stress
yeah.
Do Us Part, which is so exciting. We're going to link it in the show notes for people that want to pick it up. But would you tell everyone a little bit about it, why they should read it, where they can get it, all the things?
Sure. So when I had my first child, I recognized that my husband and I were fighting a lot, which was not the
Mm-hmm.
norm for us. We had a very happy early relationship. And I couldn't figure out why, because I'm a couples therapist. And I was like, I know all these rules. Why can't I
Mm-hmm.
follow them? And what I came to recognize was that the rules are cognitive. And so if you don't recognize that you are stressed and that you're actually in a physiological state of stress, it doesn't matter if you
Yeah.
know about gentle startup, all of that. So I really spent the last several years researching, like, why is it we know that people get in fights during moments of transition, but like, why is it so
Mhm.
hard? And what I found is that really it's the physiological stuff is in control, and that we're being given intellectualized ideas about how to
Yes.
deal with it
Yeah.
without identifying what's underneath. And so I wrote Till Stress Do Us Part to help couples who I think are under unprecedented amounts of stress. Not, I think there were horrible things that happened in the past that were stressful, but like I said, we don't release the stress now, and we're bombarded with it by technology, and we're figuring out new things that don't have a template.
That's right.
Couples used to have more of a template that they just followed whether they liked it or not. And now it's kind of like, who am I as a mother consciously? What's my internalized vision of a
Yeah.
mother? What am I supposed to do? And there's like a lot of tension and stress about what our roles look like and all sorts of things. And so the book highlights those different areas that couples are facing, and then just talks about what you can do about it.
That's so awesome. What a resource. It's so needed. I love it.
Oh, thank
Well, thanks so much for being with us today. This was so great. Where can everybody connect with you, learn more from you? Where are you hanging out?
So you can find me on my website, which is my name, ElizabethEarnshaw.com, or Instagram at Liz Listens. Those are probably the two easiest places to just link to all the other stuff.
Perfect. Okay, that'll be in the show notes for you guys, so you can click, check it out. Thanks so much for being with us today, Elizabeth. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.